Welcome back in. It's Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you on this Tuesday morning, halfway through the month of June. Slower period when it comes to a lot of things in the sports world, but you guys have certainly been plenty busy these past couple days out there taking in all things going on at Shane Beamer Football Camp. Another one yesterday that Wes joined us at, and more going on a little bit later on this week as we've talked about so much. This 2025 class really coming together, and you guys getting a good look at some of the 26 and 27 guys as well.
I mean, Chris, I remember when these camps did feature a lot of your rising seniors, and there are some out there, but it's typically not your guys that already have a bunch of offers. I say, unfortunately for us, just because it was cool to be able to watch those guys, I feel like. And so it has, as we've seen the entire process get earlier and earlier, that's kind of eliminated the need. If you're a 4 or 5 star guy, the rankings happen so early, the offers happen so early. Do you have a lot to gain from going out there and competing at a one-day camp in the 92.5-degree heat in Columbia, South Carolina? We still see it every now and then. We'll see a guy, I feel like it was really more maybe a couple times last cycle. And a lot of times, sometimes it'll be like a committed guy who just wants to go out there and get in some work with his future coach. Like, it's just kind of maybe a mini day of development. But for the most part, these camps have become about current guys like your rising seniors that are out competing for that offer in a lot of cases, or it's your 2026, which for people who don't pay attention to it, that's now your rising juniors. They'll be juniors this season. And then even 2027, and then even a couple 2028s around. And, so a lot of times I feel like these summer camps have become about your juniors as opposed to your seniors, other than those guys that are kind of right on the line of maybe getting an offer or maybe not.
I think what's the first recruiting class you covered?
Oh, God.
Like 07, 08. 07 was like the Melvin Ingram, Travian Robertson, who's now a coach.
Yeah, we saw him yesterday.
Saw him yesterday. 2008 was like Devin Taylor. Mine was around. I can never think of because I started out, just doing things like part-time, freelance. I want to say it was around 07, 08. So we are almost like 20 classes later when you start talking about 2028 guys.
What the?
Yeah.
The first guy I ever interviewed was Elliott Williams.
How do you remember it? Wow.
I remember it because it was my very first time literally ever.
Well, now the guys that you were covering in those cycles, they could have kids in these cycles.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, some of them do.
Some of them do. Did Elliott Williams never even made it here, did he?
I don't
Georgia
think
military, junior college offensive lineman.
Don't think so.
Anyway, I got us off track there.
2008 class.
There are something that we do see, Wes. I feel like more than individual guys coming to camp who like already have some offers, and you're kind of like, man, like the staff wants a guy to work out. You don't see it as much, even if they kind of one of those guys that you offer like almost a camp offer. Like, yeah, we'll offer, but we kind of want to see you in camp. I feel like the 7-on-7 tournament that South Carolina does, they run it concurrently with the O-line, D-line camps, and there's been, already, I think 3 of those days. There'll be another one tomorrow. There'll be another one Friday. That's a pretty good setting, too, to see some skill position guys, DBs, running backs, and quarterbacks as well. And we saw one last week with Cutter Woods from Westside. Wake Forest quarterback. I was giving you an opening there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The Wake Forest quarterback.
Great name,
commitment.
by the way.
Amazing quarterback or baseball name.
I feel like he needs to be a pitcher.
Or golf.
He has the hair, too.
Cutter Woods. That's also a pretty good golf name.
Yeah. I mean, Woods. Anybody that's Woods is
kind
going
of
to be.
default.
But that's why you're literally named after a pitch.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure he played baseball at some point.
There's I think there's a Cutter in MLB. I can't remember which team. Anyway, we digress. But yeah, dude, they watched Cutter Woods like it felt like all day.
Yep.
And That's a good point, though, man. I don't think I've really, like, it makes sense. I hadn't really processed it like that. But the way to get the seniors to come actually play is to call it a 7-on-7.
Bring your team. Yep.
Bring your whole team. And it is, I would say, it's interesting how when there happens to be a prospect that is a big target for South Carolina, that team happens to end up on the 7-on-7 list for that year.
Wonder how that works.
Now, they have some of the same teams every year. You know, lots of invites go out to, especially, I mean, yesterday you had some of your who's who. You had Dutch Fork there. You had Dorman there. Mm-hmm. You know, you had some Myrtle Beach. Like, you had some of your big programs there. And I think, you know, we'll see Irmo tomorrow, which, you know, A.J. Brand, Donovan Murph. They got some other guys too. And, you know, so I think it's a good evaluation tool. It's good just to get the guys in your facility too. And, you know, it is fun to watch those guys compete. But Cutter Woods, I was kind of digging on this one. And from what I understand, South Carolina just liked that he did it consistently throughout the day. Like, they watched this guy. I mean, I wonder how many games it was, because 7-on-7, you're playing back to back to back to back. It's these little quick mini games basically, and they watched him all day, and it wasn't just he can make the throws. And there's a lot of quarterbacks that can make the throws. It was that he consistently did what he needed to do throughout the day. Good size. He's a little bit bigger than I thought he was, Chris. I think he's actually grown, asking around a little bit. And that one's going to be fascinating to see. We know he's committed to Wake Forest. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens now that South Carolina has jumped in.
Put up huge numbers for Westside, and saw Cutter play in the state title game, you know, against South Florence. Led Westside on, I can't remember how much time, but it was certainly under 2 minutes. Might have even been under 1. Had some big runs, made some big throws. Led Westside, by the way, my high school alma mater's rival, but that's okay. Went to Johanna. Led Westside to a state title. Big numbers last year. I mean, 3,900 passing yards, 42 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions. Also ran for 345 yards, 6.8 a carry. So he's a guy that, like Wes said, has some size. He's got some mobility. Not going to be mistaken for Lenore Sellers, but he can run a bit and has a good arm. I thought he, you know, we got to watch him in a few games in the 7-on-7. Look good. And I think he's kind of got that gamer mentality, too, just watching him last year on the field.
Now, are you of the opinion, but both you guys can answer this, you should be getting a quarterback just about every single year? Because that's kind of the trend that we're going on now. You got Sellers, you got Reno, you got Duckworth in the 2026 class. Do you feel the need that they need to get somebody in the 25 class, or would they be okay if they didn't?
Yeah, I think your standard is always 1 per year. I think the portal changes it a little bit. It's not – I think at one time it was a requirement. You better take one. And now I think if you find a guy you like and you know, obviously they put a lot of stock into Ryan and that didn't work out. And so I think just to balance your classes, that should be your goal, is to take one every year. And if you got an in-state guy that potentially wants to be there, that has some upside, that you feel like has a chance, then yeah, you take him. And I think the portal changes it in that if you miss, if you just don't fill the role, you hit the portal. And now we've seen, here's the thing, we've seen the difficulty in going out into the portal and signing a quarterback if you already have a perceived favorite for the starting job. It's actually easier, fast forward 2 years, 3 years, it's actually easier to find a starting quarterback in the portal, in my opinion, if you have the NIL resources, because it's a situation where it's Spencer Rattler. You're going out trying to find a starter. So I do think just for your depth purposes, that's when you need to take one every year. If out of those 2 or 3 cycles, once, let's say Sellers is your starter. Let's say once Sellers leaves eventually, and who knows how many years from now that is. You hope it's to go to the NFL. Then let's say you don't feel good about it. That's when you say, all right, we're going to the portal to get a starter, frankly. But I think to build your depth, to keep your depth, You want to get young high school guys that you can keep around for a little while.
Yeah, and you're not in the position to where, and this isn't to say anything about Cutter Woods as a prospect because I like him too, but you're not going into the 2025 class, like you said, because of the portal primarily, Wes. You're not, and because of what's on your roster, you're not saying, all right, we gotta sign a freshman who can come in here and start. Like, you've got time because of the composition of your roster with having sellers, with having multiple years of eligibility, and because you know you've got the portal in your back pocket if you need it, whether that's to ultimately one day get a starter or depth. We saw them go into the portal just for depth, basically, this past offseason. You can sign a guy and have him come in and develop at quarterback in the 2025 class.
I think from a big picture standpoint, too, there's two ways to look at the portal. One way, and I'm not talking about Cutter, I'm more going in general here. In one way, let's say there's an in-state guy that maybe is right on that fringe like we've talked about, like he's a camp evaluation. We saw South Carolina offer Jaquel Holman camp evaluation. We've seen them look at, not offer yet, Michael Skinner, tight end, wide receiver from Riverside. Well, one way to look at it will be, all right, if we're unsure on a guy, you don't take him. Take small high school classes and then fill it out with the portal. The other way to look at it, however, is more guys leave your roster than ever before. You're probably not going to have a numbers crunch at the end of the day because so many guys are just going to leave. So if you think, well, there's a somewhat decent chance this guy might turn out, then you just take them all. And then if they're not playing in 2 or 3 years, they're probably going to transfer out anyway.
Well, and you ran that theory by someone yesterday, and what was the response? Heck, maybe 1 year. they might roll out in 1 year.
Yeah,
but
so,
it's a great point.
So it's like you could look at it too. You could get more specific with your offers and more picky about offers, or you could just go the complete other way and be like, you know what, they got a shot offer, let's take them. Because now you don't have the limit on your classes as far as scholarships either.
Right. Very busy month of June for recruiting and camps, which continue to on-go, and Wes and Chris will stay on top of all that. We'll continue with football on the other side. Big piece return to the fold for South Carolina football as his dreams of the Olympics for this year, at least, coming to an end. Talk about that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.